Hello and welcome to Noble TV. My name is Eugene Williams and I'm the president of the Chicago chapter of Noble. We are the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Thank you for tuning in this afternoon. We're glad that you're here. Today we have a very, very exciting guest. We have with us Mr. Dean Angelo Sr. He is the president of the Chicago FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, Chicago Lodge 7, and he's going to be talking with us today. Welcome, Dean.
It's good to see you again.
All right, great. Now, we just want to remind you that you're live on CAN TV, Channel 21. If you have friends you want to watch or call in, tell them that they can watch. If they don't have cable, they can go to cantv.org/hotline, and they can watch us on the internet. So we're going to be taking some calls in a little bit. We're going to talk with President Angelo and take some calls. You see the number at the bottom of your screen there, 312-738-1060. We're going to take some calls in a little while, but right now we're going to jump into it with President Angelo. President, how are you?
I'm good.
Great, great. You know, why don't we start by, telling our viewers what it is that your primary role and responsibility is with Noble. But before we get into that, just tell us a little bit about yourself in terms of being on the Chicago Police Department and how you came to be president of the FOP here in Chicago.
Certainly. I took the police test in 1975, and I was going to start the academy in late 78, and after completing all the testing, I wound up getting a letter that the city was freezing hiring. So we were told that we were going to start in the next class, which was, it turned out to be January of 1980. So I've been with the Chicago Police Department for 36 years. My father, God bless, he's 91. He did 37 years. And I have a son who will hit his 10th year next month in December, who wears the star number that my dad wore, that I used to wear, and now he wears it. I did patrol work like everyone else does. When I first come on, I was working in the Uptown District. After that, I went to gang crimes. I worked in the gang crime unit for almost 14 years. Made detective in my 17th year, went to bomb and arson, worked as a arson investigator, wound up working full-time for the Fraternal Order of Police for a while. A detective trainer, I trained new sergeants, I rewrote curriculum for training, I received my doctorate from Loyola in 2005, and I've been teaching at higher ed off and on for 22 years. And it was about almost 3 years ago that I decided to run for the position of president to help restore the credibility and the fraternalism within the Fraternal Order of Police.
Great, great. So now to that second part of that. So what is it that is your primary responsibilities and duties as president of the Chicago Lodge?
Well, we've got 17,500 members. Those members are made up of retirees and active, and they're below the rank of sergeant. So it's detectives and patrol officers. As the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, our responsibilities deal with collective bargaining rights, wages, just cause, discipline, health, benefits, and insurance, and you name it. Our contract has grown from a 60-some page document from the first one in 1980 to we're closing in on 200 pages probably by the next one.
Oh my goodness! So as you represent your clients, these are in fact your clients, police officers. Am I correct?
Constituents.
Your constituents.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, constituents. Okay. So do you feel any need or any responsibility to have a concern about what the public thinks or what public opinion may be, or is it just these are your constituents and you need to represent them?
Well, police officers are part of the public, and I think that's what people are losing focus on recently. These are moms and dads, soccer moms, baseball dads. We coach basketball, football, soccer. We're involved in churches. We have deacons and ministers. So these are people that are all stakeholders in the city of Chicago. We all live here. We raise our families here. And we're a very concerned part of the community where We don't want to see the stats, the violence and the crime stats continue to increase, because this is our city and our neighborhood as well. So do we have a concern about our view, or how we're viewed in the public eye? Sure we do. You know, we're a professional organization, and we're like any other collective bargaining union outside of the strike clause, where we protect our members and their rights and their livelihood, which is actually their job.
Okay. So let's get into some of the issues that have come up in the past year or so. Specifically, according to some of the information in the media, there seems to have been information that FOP was critical of the Police Accountability Task Force that was chaired by Lori Lightfoot. And so why don't you just talk to us about what it was that you had, if you had, issue with what came out with the Police Accountability Task Force.
How much time do we have?
Briefly
yeah.
Talk about it then, okay.
You know, as an instructor of higher education, I teach my students, and I've always taught students, whether it's in the police academy, master's or undergrad programs, it's all about credibility. Your name walks into that room far before you arrive. And I find the report to be incredible based on a lot of statistical data that they tried to bring forward. So when you're incredible, or when you have credibility on page 1, you lose it on page 2, it's hard to regain it on page 3.
Okay.
The data that they used with the street stops, let's say, focuses on populations of color being stopped at a higher rate that's being reported than Caucasians. So when you look at the locations of the statistics, you're looking at areas, and I remember I laid this out for Ms. Lightfoot on Chicago Tonight one night, and I said to her that if you look at what's taken into consideration, the 11th district on the west side, it's a smaller district geographically than the 16th district. It's about a quarter of the size. But you have 444 police officers assigned there on a daily basis as part of the assignments to the 11th district. And besides that, because of the shootings and the narcotics and the weapons, which the 11th district leads in arrests and in murders in that area, the department deploys the gang teams, the gun teams, the saturation teams, and narcotic teams. So you're over deployed by the daily assignment personnel, and then you deploy on a regular basis the outside units. So when you look at the population that are there for the crime, not the ethnicity, you should expect an increase in numbers. And when I brought this to her, and I also asked if she removed African American officers that stop African American citizens, or Hispanic officers in Pilsen that stop Hispanic citizens, she said, well, why would we? Some things are just obvious. Well, again, that doesn't answer the question. So there are some stats in there that are a bit incredible. If you look at the 4 forums, the open forums that she had, 155 people came to the microphone. Out of those 155 people, because I watched each and every one, I wrote down the names of the people that came to the mic, who they represented, what their issue was, and out of those 155, 129 were actually individuals, because there's repeaters that come to multiple sessions. And I asked if she went and did a canvas, knock on a door and go in a living room and talk to somebody, because that environment is not conducive to a person that wants more police or more policing in her area, because now people know where she lives, who she is. So you're getting a population that is very minimal compared to the 2 million plus that reside in Chicago, and that 129 voices that were unique to those 4 different forums is driving the narrative of that accountability task force report. And again, I find that to be a bit incredible, to think that that's the voice of Chicago, when no one took the initiative to knock on a door, no one took the initiative to go to a church or a community group or a senior center and talk to people that want that corner cleared off so they can send the kids to the store, you know, kids are out there, instead of catching baseballs, they're catching bullets. And that's not what childhood should be in this city.
Got it. We're going to come back to a couple of more topics on that, but right now, I want to remind our viewers that you can call in. This is live and interactive. 312-738-1060. Let me check and see if we have a caller on the line. Is there a caller on?
Yes.
Go ahead, caller.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. The question is, with the mayor's and the superintendent's push to hire 1,000 new officers, will this just be sporadic at best, or will this be consistent for the next few years? You know, the exam hasn't been always offered consistently. So just trying to get a little feedback on that.
Okay. Thank you, caller. So the question is this going to be a consistent hiring, or is this going to be sporadic, or, you know, are they going to be putting people in the academy every month? I think that's what the caller was trying to ask. Did they share with you, or are you aware?
A little bit. You know, I've got a meeting with the superintendent coming up next week, or maybe at the end of this week. I should have asked Doreen before I sat down, but if it was up to me, we'd hire 2,000 right now. The last numbers that I saw, we were at 11,958,
Okay.
and I think the mayor wants to get to 13,000 plus. That's going to take a lot of hiring just to stay through attrition. We're going to lose 400 people by the end of this year,
Okay.
and we've got another 300 people that are online to be gone by June of next year. So if you look at those numbers alone, it's going to take a long time to just meet those numbers because the academy is 6 months long.
Right. Just the attrition
Right, just to
factor.
keep up with attrition. So then to get to that 13,000, I'm hoping that the academy might go to 2 shifts, days and afternoons,
Okay.
and just load up that building and get these young kids back on the street, or get them on the street where we desperately need them.
Right. You know, I know we have a lot of really important stuff to talk about, but there's also a really, really important event that took place late last night, and I think we would be remiss if we didn't say congratulations to the Chicago Cubs. I know that is may not go over that well with the superintendent, him being a diehard Sox fan, but I'm sure even he and all of the citizens in the city of Chicago are really, really proud of the heroic effort that the Cubs put on last night to win the World Series. So I just wanted to take a quick second out to say congratulations to the Cubs here.
Now I know what to bring them.
Now you know
Yeah.
what to bring. Okay, as long as it's White Sox, that's all you can bring the superintendent.
It'll be a little blue, I think.
Okay, okay. So, but let's move on to the Department of Justice is here.
Yes.
And they're doing patterns and practice review of the Chicago Police Department. And in many instances, I mean, I think there were several settings where they would call officers in, or at least allow officers to come in and interview them about what they were seeing on the streets, or how they felt about how things were being run, and so forth and so on. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, in November of 15, Lisa Madigan put out a letter calling for the DOJ to come. And although the mayor and superintendent at that time were under the opinion that it was unnecessary, I got on the phone right away with our national president, and I spoke to Chuck Canterbury and Jimmy Pasco, our executive director out in Washington, and I asked them if they could help facilitate a meeting with Loretta Lynch. So the last week of November, I was already on the schedule for the first Tuesday of December to go to, or second Tuesday of December, to get into a meeting with Loretta Lynch and her staff. I went out there. I was scheduled to fly. I flew in on a Tuesday. She announced she was coming on Monday, but I was already on her schedule. And I brought our contract books. I brought my background, my resume. I brought some discs that we did about community relations in the FOP. And on that Tuesday, or Wednesday morning, we met, but it was the same day that San Bernardino hit. So the president was meeting with Miss Lynch, and I met with her number 2 person, Vanita Gupta, Zach Farden, and a whole litany of attorneys from the DOJ. Our national president, myself, Jimmy Pasco. We sat for a couple of hours. We discussed their direction, their intention. We talked about the previous reports, and I opened up the FOP building to help facilitate communication with them, because we didn't want our members to go to the workplace, go into the commander's office, sit for a half hour with the DLJ, and come out and be ostracized.
Okay.
The FOP is their building. They own that. That's owned by the members. So they feel a bit more comfortable coming in. So we scheduled a couple of talking dates and some meetings, and we facilitated, I believe, 3 or 4 different meetings with our members. I've met with them, with my board of directors, at least 3-4 times, and I just had another meeting with them as recently as the 25th.
Great. Let me just back up a little bit. And when does this contract expire?
Our contract expires in June of 17, June 30th.
Okay. Are you already in, have you started negotiations? Are you in deliberations? No. Have you had conversations with the city's attorneys? Or?
Well, I had a conversation with one of the city attorneys about it, but
okay.
you know, I just started to put together our core team of the FOP's core team of negotiating members. To come forward with us and help us negotiate the contract. And the city is generally slow at getting to the negotiation table. There have been some times we sat, the FOP and the patrol and detectives, for 3-4 years working on the old agreement because it just is a slow process.
Right. You know, there's been a lot of conversation about how the public feels about the current contract. And so kind of a two-pronged question is, do you anticipate that the current patterns and practice review by the Department of Justice, do you feel that it's going to have any impact on the contract going forward? And then secondly, talk about how some of the benefits and the things that are in the contract as it is now, how that came to be as opposed to giving raises in the past, you know. So why don't we just start with the impact, if any, that you think there might be with the DOJ's?
Sure. Well, you know, that's why I brought the contract books to Washington when we first went out there. I wanted them to see our contract book. There's nothing in our contract book that's illegal or violates anyone's civil rights. You know, and that's what the DOJ is here for. They're looking at the department's pattern and practice. Does anything in our agreement impede the civil rights of an individual, whether it's a police officer or a civilian? And we've had attorneys on this since the first agreement. The city's had attorneys on this since the first agreement. There's nothing in our contract that's illegal.
So what they can do. So let me just ask you. So, so you don't anticipate then that the Department of Justice will be able to change anything in the current contract, or have they even hinted that they might try?
Well, they brought some issues forward in the last meeting we had, and they had questions and concerns about some of the aspects of the contract. But what the DOJ can do is suggest for the city to negotiate certain components either in or out of the contract going forward. So they'll have a direction that the city should take. But it is a negotiation process. So there is going to be some language, I'm sure, that the city's going to come forward with that's going to be DOJ orientated or community orientated. But I don't think a lot of people realize what our contract does and doesn't do.
Okay. So talk to me about that second part of it, about trade-offs and that you've, the gains that you have in terms of certain protections in the contract.
Well, yeah, there's one of the things that's come up about our contract is an officer's ability to change a statement if a video exists. So if IPRA or COPA going forward or IED has a video and an officer makes a statement and then the officer gets eyes or gets an opportunity to watch the video, the way the language reads, and this came up in Washington when I was out there, the way the language reads is that an officer can change their statement without any fear that they're going to be hit with a Rule 14, which is a false official report. Right. That appears on its surface that we pull the fast one on the city or on the department. But what we wanted in our contract, and what I told DOJ in Washington, is that we wanted to watch videos, if they existed, prior to making a statement, so that the officers could be accurate. If it was a stressful situation involving, the use of weapons, or involving, hands-on arrests, if an officer was either, beat or had to forcibly take someone into custody, and it was captured on video, that they could review it. At the negotiation table, they said no. But we'll let you look at it and change the statement if we have one. To me, that makes no sense. To the DOJ, it made no sense when I told this to them. And when they asked me why, I said, I don't know, but when you get to Chicago, ask them.
And you still haven't gotten a...
No.
Okay. All right, so, there's so much that we want to talk about. I know you mentioned COPA, this new Citizen Office of Police Accountability. Was FOP consulted when they started down this road?
A little bit. They had the municipal ordinance put together. They had it in draft form. It's changed probably 5 or 6 times. Some of our input was taken. It was more or less legal language and cleanup, time frames, and issues of consistency. But the substance of the report is pretty much, I think, accountability task force orientated, community orientated, and litigation orientated, with a lot less input from the FOP or the PB and the PA, who represent the sergeants, lieutenants, and captains.
Okay, I know there are several things we want to talk about. Let me just ask you. I think there was considerable discussion about whether or not you felt, or FOP or the officers felt, that they had gotten a fair shake when the recommendation to fire several of the officers in the Laquan McDonald investigation. I think I recall even Lori Lightfoot from the Police Accountability Task Force kind of intimated that she didn't think that all of the procedures had been followed. What are your comments on overall in terms of the recommendation to fire those officers?
Well, there's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of moves afoot on against police officers, administratively, that I think are driven by the politics behind it. Whether people want to admit it or not, we have officers that are being adjudicated for incidents that are 12 years old. And they've already signed up for the accepting a certain amount of penalty, and they're saying, no, we're not going to take that, what we offered before, and we're going to move to separate you. So I think that there's a big push to say, look how many people we're moving to separate since we got in this position. And right or wrong, that's where we're at right now. And we'll address those on a case-by-case basis. But on the case that you mentioned, on the McDonald case, where officers have been, subjected, or in the process of being subjected for separation, we don't know the circumstances that they're justifying the separation. We've got 13,000 pages of documentation. Which individuals were being told that they falsified a report? Where were they in that situation of that video? We don't know exactly, all the specifics about it, but we will address it as we go forward.
Okay. There are any of these topics that we've just covered so far, we could spend a whole show doing and there are so many things that we want to talk about that we're not going to be able to talk about. But I do want to get this one in. Tell me what your thoughts are on part of that Police Accountability Task Force, and even comments made by the mayor that racism exists in the Chicago Police Department, and with the Police Accountability Task Force, they even talked about the alleged racism and along with systemic failures throughout the department.
Yeah, and that's one of the issues I have. One of the major issues I have with the report, and also the statements the mayor made, was it seems like there's a move afoot for political reasons to justify a history of what some people think is an abusive agency. You were on this department for 36 years. I'm in my 36th year right now. There's an old saying, and I'm sure you're going to smile when I say this. We're not racist. We don't like anybody. We don't like people that are out there doing wrong to individuals, that are out there victimizing individuals, that are out there selling poison to our kids or firing weapons at a crowd without any sort of consideration to who they hit. You know, we've got 23 children that are 12 years or less that have been shot. 11 died so far this year. We get upset with that. When we go to work, no one goes to work to look at an individual at their ethnicity and perform differently than they would with someone else that looked differently than that person. It's about police work. It's about criminal profiling. When I worked on the west side in the gang unit, if an individual was driving through an alley with a Suburban City sticker and was Caucasian in Washington and Pine, I knew he wasn't there to buy cigarettes. You know, that kid's from Westchester buying heroin. So it's criminal profiling. It's not based on his ethnicity. It's based on what people do, and they fit a pattern. It's part of policing that non-police really don't get. That's why I'm encouraging politicians, elected officials from Springfield or from the city council to get in a squad car and drive around with these kids that are out there in some of our busier areas and see what they do, see the kinds of calls they take in, see the kinds of street stops that they're engaged in. And I think once they do, they'll get a completely different perspective on what makes up a Chicago police officer's workday.
Okay, our time is running down, and I just want to get one more question in and ask you to be brief on it. Talk to me about the diversity within FOP, in the top leadership of FOP, and what you've done in terms of outreach to the community or to other organizations throughout the department. And I got to ask you to be brief on this.
Yeah, well, I came to your organization before I was running. I came to Noble and I asked for participation, and I wanted to make, and one of my big pushes for the FOP was to have the boardroom look like the roll call room. Guys, girls, Hispanics, African Americans, Caucasians, people from younger seniority and senior years. We didn't get that in the election. And I promised that I would make a change. And when 2 openings occurred on my board of directors, one of the first individual that was placed was a African American male, and when the second position opened up, I placed a African American female. So we would have people of color sitting on that board, involved at that table, not only making good on my promise, but also to make good to the membership and give them the realization that this is everyone's FOP.
Great, great. Again, we're going to have to ask you to come back. There's just so much stuff that we need to cover that we're not going to have a chance to cover tonight. We want to remind our viewers that this is Noble TV on CAN TV 21. This is the place to go to get the latest information with respect to what's going on in law enforcement across the metropolitan area and what is being done in conjunction with working with our communities to regain, maintain, and sustain public trust. And so you need to tune in every Thursday at 7:30 right here at CAN TV so that you can see that. And I'm going to close tonight and by thanking you for being here with us, and only if you promise to come back again.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
So please do that. And I'm Gene Williams from Noble TV, and thank President Angelo for being here. And so here's the last thing we want to close with you, and that is please go out and vote. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next Thursday.